So Jamie is the recent author of this book called Zoe Bowie Sings, Despite All Sad Things. We want to give a real plug for this book.
Thank you.
She's also many other things that we're going to talk about. So in particular, tell us a bit about yourself. You've been a blogger and a community manager for various pharma companies.
Absolutely, yes. My experience with pharmaceutical companies was very organic. 6 months after I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I was an educator for special education, but I began a blog to heal and to write about my journey. And pharmaceutical companies started to see it, and they started to ask me to write for them. In the beginning, I was very reluctant. I was a true patient, and I thought perhaps they wanted me to plug treatments. And I said no, because multiple sclerosis is very individual. What works for me may not work for somebody else. So I didn't want to endorse any one project or treatment. But then I learned that that was illegal for compliance reasons, so there was no mention of treatments. So I agreed, and I've been doing that for 5 years now.
Right. So
for
that's
97
right.
Countries.
Great. So that's great. So I'd like you to tell us what you got out of this, and also how it changed your ideas about the pharmaceutical industry.
Well, I think, in the beginning, you look at it and you're very mistrustful. But when you distrust the transparency and the authenticity behind it. But then going behind the scenes, you see how authentic it was. I was pleasantly surprised. But then as a community manager, it was my job not only to blog and write, but to engage the conversation and perhaps to show people that it really was authentic and transparent. Did that answer all your questions?
So
Denise?
Juan was saying, for example, that when you do new things, you make mistakes. Was there anything that you wish you personally had done differently? Maybe not.
Oh, no. I'm sure there are many things. I think the first thing that I learned as a community manager was to let the community lead. There's very little policing that I realized I needed to be doing as a community manager. Typically, if something very off base or wrong or malicious comes up, the community itself tends to fix that. So really, I engage in conversation, but in terms of policing, I'm very little involved, because unless they mention something about treatment that is out of compliance. So I've learned that the community and the patients will lead. And from the pharmaceutical side, I've learned to let the patients lead. The patients are so much more empowered and intelligent than we give them credit for.
Now, this is something you were saying, too, that you always hear about, this desire to take the reading level of the content down. And
yes.
You feel strongly that this could be excessive.
Yeah, in America we have the expression "dumb it down," and I feel like perhaps sometimes pharmaceutical companies think they're doing the patients a favor by not using scholarly journals and using those as resources. But I've learned that we can be both scholarly, resourceful, and we can also be empowering and inspiring. But we need to do both. Typically, when they're setting up MS communities or a community for any sick community, they choose a mission. So they typically choose to be either resourceful or to be more like a friend and empowering and inspiring. And I've learned that patients, me personally, I want both. And so going forward, I wish that the pharmas would do that and employ that more.
So you told me two things. You told me that the patient gets out of this reducing their isolation.
Yes.
And you feel that pharma gets out of this these new relationships and new understandings.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us those two things?
There are two things. When you're diagnosed with a disease, my disease affects I have lesions on my spine. So I couldn't walk, barely, little, petite. in the beginning. So you almost feel like you're plucked up and you're put on a boat and you're kicked out to sea and you feel very alone and isolated. So the benefits of social media, and you can't walk, so sometimes you're in bed and isolated. So something as simple as a tablet and a community that's there for you makes you feel tremendously not alone. That not isolating feeling is very, very important.
And yesterday we spoke in another session about, I called it a land grab. In that, I mean that for any one disease, do you think a patient could belong to more than one pharmaceutical community? Or when a pharma company sees that there's already one who's got one, do they say, well, let's forget it? What do you think?
Well, I think if you allowed a writer to work for more than one pharmaceutical company, it's a testament to how transparent they are. And they're not just trying to get your business and for you to use their treatment. It's more transparent.
But from the patient standpoint, can they develop friends in several communities?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have friends from all over the world from several communities. So I do believe that, yes.
So what recommendation do you make to people who are thinking, like if they're in a pharma company thinking of opening their community, what would you say?
I would say that the patient is smarter than we give them credit for. The patients are used to information now at their fingertips, and they're used to being, more and more, they're getting used to being prudent and discerning with what information is valuable and which you should not trust so much. So I would give the community more credit for that in terms of what you post and the information you share and the blogs, et cetera.
I also have another question, which is, you mentioned the...
Also, I'd let the patient lead. That's another thing.
Okay.
Let the patient lead. Stand back for a little bit and wait for the patients to show you what they need and what they want, and they will. You'll see it as you moderate.
So 97 countries, that's a lot of languages. How does that work?
That's the more technical side, and probably my friend Robert Jan, who is in the front tweeting right now, could probably speak better at that. I'm a content, I purely focus on the content and the writing, but we do have people who translate and have the different platforms, like for instance in Greece and et cetera. So I write in English, and then I have people who take care of that. But I have learned that the world is much smarter than me, and they tend to speak many languages and understand it in English way more than I could write it.
Well, thank you for she was so brave to come take the plane by herself, all the way from New Jersey to Paris, and to set herself up in her room, etc., and to come here and to help us like this. This is not so easy, a spontaneous interview as opposed to slides. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure, all of you. I'm in the company of such esteemed people that it's a pleasure. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you.
So you can go sit down.
Thank you.